The 3 weeks is a time of national mourning. It on the calendar it falls between the dates of the breaching of the walls of the holy city of Jerusalem on the 17th of Tammuz and the actual destruction of the Bais Hamikdash of the temple on the 9th of Av. So that's 3 weeks between those two dates. And halachically, it's a time where we are enjoined to mourn, to grieve. And it is a very sad time. But at the same time, it's not a contradiction. There's another perspective. And that is that at the same time that we're grieving for what we lost, the grandeur, the splendor of what once was when the temple stood, at the very same time, we are looking forward to what will be. When, as the prophets have promised us, the temple will be rebuilt in its place, and all of the mitzvahs of the offerings will be reinstated. And the revelation of God's presence, of the Shekhinah, will return. So it's a difficult time to be Jewish, not just during the 3 weeks, but really the past 2,000 years. Because on one hand, there's so much loss. There's so much to mourn the loss of. On the other hand, there's so much to look forward to because good times are coming. And whatever it is that was taken away will be replaced by something far greater. To the extent that the Rambam says in the laws of fasts that these fast days, which commemorate the historical dates having to do with the destruction, not only will they be canceled when Mashiach comes, but they'll be transformed. They'll become days of rejoicing, which is kind of an interesting concept if you think about it. If these dates coincide with tragic events and therefore they're days of national mourning, so then once the cause for mourning is removed, when Mashiach comes and everything we lost will be returned to us, so then I would understand that you would mourn no longer. You would sort of cancel the mourning. But the Rambam says, no, actually it's going to be transformed into days, these days, these very days are going to be transformed into days of rejoicing. So how do you understand that? What you understand is that it's not just that Hashem gave us something and he took it away and then he gave it back, a zero-sum game, in which case, what was the point of it all? But rather, it's a process. And part of that process is loss. But every event that has occurred, even the most painful events, are essential and necessary to the process. And in the end, it all becomes used. It's all part of the plan. And it couldn't be as great as it's going to be without having gone through the trials and the tribulations that we went through. The only way to really understand this, I mean, we could have faith, but I'm saying to understand it, to wrap our heads around it, is actually the way that Rabbi Akiva understood it when he himself saw the site of the destroyed temple. Rabbi Akiva and his cohorts, his fellow sages, were in the location of the destroyed temple. This is after the destruction of the second temple. And they saw the desolation. They saw how foxes were walking. I think maybe we think of foxes as kind of charming, but in North America, imagine raccoons. Okay, it's not that it wasn't charming. It was anything but. And they saw foxes walking around in the spot, the very spot where the high priest used to enter on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur. And they were all crying, and Rabbi Akiva was laughing, and they said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Why are you crying?" And he cited for them the verse from Micha, which says, "Tzion Soda Ticharesh," that Tzion, Zion, Jerusalem, the temple, will be plowed like a field. What does that mean? Anyone who ever studied Hilchas Shabbos, the laws of Sabbath observance, knows that there are 39 prohibited malachas. A malacha means a creative act, a productive act. It doesn't just mean labor. It means something that accomplishes something. In fact, something that's destructive, that's kilkul, is not considered labor on Shabbos. One of the 39 forms of labor is plowing. So when we say, Tzion Sadi Techarish, the place of the Bais Hamikdash will be plowed like a field, what does it mean? Is it a destructive act or a productive act? Depends how you look at it. If you look at a snapshot in the moment, it's destruction. If you understand it as a process, then it was plowing, and it's a productive act, and it was all for the purpose of greater growth. The more you plow, the more things grow. There's a story about a Jew back in Russia who was in prison. He wrote his wife, and they would read all of his letters. In one of her correspondences to him, she says that the winter is coming to an end, and we're running out of potatoes. I need to plant potatoes, but the ground is still so hard, I can't break the ground. I can't loosen the soil to plant the potatoes. So he writes his wife back and he says, "Don't touch the ground in our yard because that's where I've hidden all of the weapons." And the next day, a wagon full of soldiers pulls up with shovels and axes, and they tear apart the entire yard. Of course, they find nothing, and they leave. She writes him back and she says, "Craziest thing happened. Soldiers came and they tore apart the yard with shovels and axes." And he writes her back and says, "Now you can plant the potatoes." So if you were to take a snapshot of that moment where the soldiers were ripping up the yard, is that destruction or is that productive? If you only knew what the soldiers knew from their perspective, is it destructive or is it productive? But if you understand the big picture, then it wasn't destruction, it was plowing. And the more you plow, the more things grow. So yeah, this sad time is not just going to be taken away from us and canceled out and nullified as if it never were. No, to the contrary, this sad time will become a time of special rejoicing, special joy, greater joy than the joy that we're going to be constantly having when Mashiach comes. So like I said, this is an awkward time, the 3 weeks, but it's been an awkward couple of millennia for the Jewish people. On one hand, we are grieving unfathomable loss, and at the very same time, we are anticipating unfathomably great times. So we're going to do both. We're going to do both. We're going to mourn the past, and we're going to anticipate the future, the near future, the imminent future. And if you've ever been driving in a car, you know that you have to have a rear view mirror. It's not safe if you don't see what's behind you. And that's like the Jewish people. We never forget. We continue to mourn the loss of the Bais Hamikdash even though it was 2,000 years ago. We don't forget our history. That's the rear view mirror. We always take a peek at it. We always take a glance to remember where we've been, where we come from. But at the same time, you probably notice the rear view mirror is up there on the windshield. And between the two of them, the rear view mirror and the windshield's a lot bigger than the rear view mirror. It's important to look in the rear view mirror, get a glance to remember where you came from, but the picture that we need to have in mind, it has to be crystal clear, is what's ahead of us, where we're we're headed to, our destination. So, with that in mind, what I want to do tonight is talk about the Bais Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, Bais Hamikdash, Hashem's chosen house, as the Rambam refers to it. In Hilchos Bais Hamikdash, the laws of Hashem's chosen house. And I want to talk about it with this double tone, this paradoxical approach. On one hand, we're recalling something that was amazing that was taken from us, and we're in mourning. On the other hand, we're getting excited because this is what's coming. And our hearts are big enough to contain both. So we're going to talk about the Bais Hamikdash. Specifically, what I wanted to do is talk about aspects of the Bais Hamikdash that are described in the Rambam's Hilchos Bais Hamikdash. Lubavitcher Rebbe suggested that this is one of the most effective ways that we can participate in the rebuilding of the Bais Hamikdash before it actually happens, and that is by studying the Rambam's Hilchos Bais Hamikdash. It's a section within Mishnah Torah, and I'm not going to study the text. I'm not going to read to you from the text, although I do encourage anybody to pick up a Mishnah Torah and to check out Hilchos Bais Hamikdash and to study those laws during these days. But what I want to share with you are life lessons, spiritual teachings that we can learn from certain aspects of the Bais Hamikdash. Just to give a little product placement here, the idea for this, as I said, the Rebbe encouraged study of Hilchos Bais Hamikdash, but the idea for this specifically in this format that we're doing it this year, it was a partnership that was formed between the Meaningful Minute organization and Soul Words, and of course Chabad of the Five Towns is our gracious host here for this event. What we're doing is, during the 3 weeks, we're putting out a Mikdash Minute, as opposed to a Meaningful Minute. And they're little minute, you know how the kids are today. They can't watch anything that's longer than a minute long. So we're putting out these little minute Instagram story length teachings, but this is the grown-up version of it. So here I'll be able to unpack it a little bit more. But the original concept was to have these Mikdash Minute videos with something about the Bais Hamikdash that you could apply in your life and to be inspired. And so that's what I'm doing here, but this is the grown-up version of it. Okay. One of the kalim, one of the utensils in the Bais Hamikdash was the kiyar. The kiyar is a sink. And the sink was used for the kehanim, for the priests who worked in the Bais Hamikdash, to wash their hands and feet, to prepare for their work, for their aveda. So, what's the kiyar? You know, there are kalim, there are these utensils in the Bais Hamikdash. Each one of them has such significance and symbolism. You have in the holy area, there's the courtyard, and then within the courtyard there's the holy area, and then within the holy area there's the Holy of Holies. But in the holy area you have the Menorah, which is this candelabrum, and you have the shulchan, which is this golden table with the showbread loaves on it, and you have the mizbeach hazahav, the golden altar, where the incense was burned every day. But then you have, outside of that, you have the kiyar, and it was a sink. So what's the significance of this sink? It's like you have to wash your hands from the kiyar, but then the real avodah is the shulchan, the menorah, the mizbeach. So I want to tell you something. What's holier? Turning off your phone before you go into shul to daven, or davening when you're in shul? So everyone would say davening when you're in shul. But not necessarily. It's not necessarily correct. Maybe turning off your phone, or at least putting it on silent before you go into shul is even holier than the davening you're going to do in shul. Sometimes the preparation for the mitzvah is greater than the mitzvah in a certain way. Why? The mitzvah is holy. But the preparation for the mitzvah has to do with the mundane, with the worldly, with the ordinary, with the everyday. So the mitzvah is already holy, but the preparation for the mitzvah is when you have to actually engage with ordinary things and align them with holy things, like the kiyah, washing from the kiyah. They were washing their hands, which was symbolic of washing themselves free of their worldly involvements. Remember, Kohanim didn't stay in the Bais Hamikdash all day, every day. They had day jobs. They would work in shifts. So even the Kohen had what to wash off. When he would want to come to the Bais Hamikdash and be involved in holy things, he'd have to wash off his involvement with the ordinary day-to-day world. You might think that washing that stuff off is just an unavoidable prerequisite, preliminary phase to getting to the real important stuff, the avodah, the real holy stuff that he's going to do. But there's something very special about getting ourselves ready to do the holy thing. We're getting ready to do something holy can even be holier than the thing that's holy. What was the kiyah made of? As a copper? Very good. And where was the copper taken from? Donations. Which donations? The women. Why did the women have copper? They were mirrors. We're told that in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, during the most crushing days of slavery, when the men had lost their will to bring children into the world, so the women used to use these mirrors to beautify themselves and attract their husbands so that there would not be a population collapse. And in fact, to the contrary, even though they were being brutally oppressed, they had a population explosion. It was all to the credit of these women who understood what they needed to do, and they used these mirrors to make themselves more attractive to their husbands. When the women donated these mirrors, Moshe Rabbeinu was actually hesitant to accept them because of their origin, because of he knew where they came from and what they'd been used for. He wasn't sure if that was appropriate to incorporate into the Bais Hamikdash. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu appreciated the idea of Dira B'Tachtonim, which means Hashem wants a dwelling place in the lower realms. After all, why does Hashem say, make me, Asuli Mikdash, make me a Mikdash? Why doesn't Hashem just make a Mikdash? Because the whole point of it should be a physical place in the physical world, built by physical labor, from physical materials. That's the Dira B'Tachtonim, a dwelling place in the lower realms. That's what Hashem desires. So Moshe Rabbeinu understood that, but he figured just the mere fact that this Mikdash was being made out of physical materials, that's low enough. But you don't have to incorporate something that has this questionable past. That, in other words, there's no question what the women did was ultimately for a holy purpose. They brought Jewish children into the world. But, sometimes, the ends justify the means. So maybe the ends are very holy, but the means are, you got to do what you got to do. So that's how Moshe felt about it. He said, look, the ends were very holy. They brought Jewish children into the world. But the means, how they accomplished it, was, it's not necessarily something, look, we're telling it like a Bible story, but how would you feel if, your mother was in Mitzrayim and she was sitting there at the dinner table talking about this? And, you remember when your father would come home from slavery and I would look in the mirror and make myself pretty for him so that we could have you? It's like, okay, TMI, I don't want to hear about it. I'm deliberately trying to induce some cringe over here so that we can, because everybody says, it's so obvious. I was Moshe Rabbeinu, I would have accepted it. No, you wouldn't. No, you would also be a little bit weirded out by it. And Hashem told Moshe, accept them. they are more precious. The expression Hashem uses in the Medrash, chavivan alai. They are more precious to me than all of the donations. There's many reasons why these mirrors were precious, but one insight that we have why they were so precious is because specifically they weren't used directly for a mitzvah. They were used for the preparation that enables you to get a step closer to a mitzvah. And that is what is choviv, that's what's precious to Hashem. Not just the mitzvah. Mitzvahs are already mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are already holy. But when we can do ordinary stuff, everyday stuff, like eating, drinking, procreating, things that all human beings do, and in fact, the animals do. And we can do those things in a way that is part of the process of getting closer to a mitzvah, so that has a special chavivus, that has a special preciousness to Hashem. And that identity of those mirrors was retained even when they were turned into a vessel in the Bais Hamikdash. Instead of being something like the Menorah or the Shulchan or the Mizbeach, where the vessel itself is being used for a mitzvah. No. The kiyar, the sink, is the preparation to wash off your connection to the mundane so you can get ready to get closer to doing something that's a mitzvah. So that's how we learned that sometimes it could be, at least from a certain perspective, turning off your phone before you go into shul is more holy than what you do when you daven when you're in shul. Okay. And can you believe that I said that same concept in 57 seconds? I did. But this version was better. Of course I have to say that, because otherwise you're saying, why did he, if he could have done it in 57 seconds, why did he do it in 5 minutes? Okay, yeah. You should see, it's really remarkable how we squish these ideas down. Compression. Yeah. I didn't explain all, when I did in the 57-second version for the Mikdash minute, I didn't explain all this stuff. I'm just hoping people will put 2 and 2 together and they'll extrapolate. But over here, I told you, this is like the adult version. This is like the mature version of the Mikdash minute. Okay, fine. All right, here's another one. I got more for you. All right. The Menorah. We mentioned the Menorah. The Menorah is a candelabrum. I know everyone thinks about the Menorah, the Hanukkah Menorah. The Hanukkah Menorah, what do you think it's based on? It's based on the Menorah of the Bais Hamikdash. We all know the story. When the Greeks defiled the temple and the Maccabees came into the temple and they found only enough oil to last for 1 day, and miraculously it lasted the 8 days it took to make new oil. So why were they lighting oil? What was going on? They were lighting oil because that's something that you do every single day. In the Bais Hamikdash, there was this big candelabrum. There was this big, what's a normal word for a candelabrum? Candelabrum. A menorah. There's this big menorah, and it was made out of gold. It had 7 cups. You can say, hold on, I thought a menorah has 8 cups. Yeah, the Hanukkah one has 8 cups. But the one in the Bais Hamikdash had 7 cups, and they would light it every day. Okay. It's interesting that in the building specs that Hashem gives Moshe, and then Moshe gives to Bezalel, who was the architect who made the Mishkan. The Mishkan was the version that they had when they were wandering in the desert for 40 years. And then the Mikdash is the permanent structure that was first built by Shlomo Melech, King Solomon. At any rate, the way that it's described there in the building specs is there's certain ornaments there. There's like a building code. You have to have certain types of ornaments and non-functional details. There were these ornamental flowers and orbs and also cups, ornamental cups, as opposed to the functional cups. On the top, there were functional cups where they put the oil. But there were also ornamental cups along the arms of the menorah. What's fascinating is we have a sketch that the Rambam himself drew. And in that sketch, the cups are upside down. How do you know they're upside down? You know how a goblet looks? Actually, here, hold on a second. This is going to help me, okay? All right. This is not so exaggerated, the difference between but here you see the bottom is narrow and the top is wide, okay? I mean, relatively. It's not flared that much, but the bottom is narrower than the top. So this would be a right side up cup. So the way that Rambam draws it is with the wide part down, facing down, like this. He draws them as triangles. Okay. So the question is, was the Rambam being sloppy? I doubt that's the case. Okay. So if he meant it, if he did it on purpose, then what's up with that? And why are the goblets, the ornamental goblets on the Menorah, upside down? So the Rebbe says we could actually decode this based on another feature of the Bais Hamikdash, and that is that the building that Shlomo Melech built had windows that would never pass an energy audit. They were called, they were shkufim atumim. Shkufim atumim means they were flared outward. In the olden days, remember, they didn't have central air and heating. So what they would do is they would try to maximize on the natural light and warmth of the sun. So windows generally were flared inward, sort of to cause the light from outside to be maximized on the inside. And in the Bais Hamikdash, they were built the exact opposite. They were narrow on the inside and wide on the outside, so that they would be like dispersed outward, which is a little bit funny because outside is where the light is. And yet it's explained that those windows were testimony to the fact that the Bais Hamikdash was not a regular building. It wasn't built with windows that are meant to draw in light. It was built with windows that allow light to escape and to go out. Physically, we're talking about the light of the Menorah, but also we're saying spiritually, the spiritual light of the Bais Hamikdash was meant to be diffused to the entire world. The Bais Hamikdash was not just a symbol of the Jewish people. It was a source of spirituality for the entire world. In fact, our sages tell us that if the non-Jewish nations would have understood what the Bais Hamikdash did for them, they would, instead of sending their legions to destroy it, they would have sent all of their armies to surround it and to protect it because of the benefit that having the Bais Hamikdash did for the entire world. So we understand the windows in the Bais Hamikdash are flared outward because the Bais Hamikdash is all about giving out light, not bringing it in. The same idea with the cups is that what is a right side up cup? Well, functionality all depends on purpose. If the purpose of the cup is to hold a drink, then this is right side up. But if the purpose of the cup is to dispense the drink, then this is right side up. In fact, this is upside down because this not very good at dispensing. This is holding it, not dispensing it. And since the Bais Hamikdash is all about dispensing, so therefore the archetypical cups, the symbol of cups, these ornamental cups, were like this with the wide part facing down. And it's a lesson to all of us that what is holiness? Holiness is being a giver. It's finding opportunities to share our gifts and our resources and our talents. And everything we have is only that we can share it with others, materially and spiritually. One of the secrets that Rebbe taught us was that when it comes to our Yiddishkeit, our Jewish observance, and our family's Jewish observance, the only Yiddishkeit that ultimately we really have and hold on to is whatever Yiddishkeit we're actively giving away to others. So if we're keeping it to ourselves and just living an insular life, that lasts as long as it lasts. But if we're emissaries and we're going out and spreading the light, then it has an enduring power. Okay. Let's talk about another one of the kelim, the oren. The Ark. Didn't they just come out with an Indiana Jones sequel? Yeah, sure. No, I was going to pretend they don't even know about it. If I know about it, you guys know about it. Come on. I was just happy Harrison Ford was still alive.
Is he in it?
What?
He's in it?
I assume so. I don't know. Anyways, Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? They were looking for the Aron, right? Isn't that what it was? Yeah. Okay. And so the Ark, we talked about the Menorah, which was in the Kodesh, the holy area. And I mentioned in passing the golden altar and the shulchan, the table, which are also in the holy area. But then there was the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies. And that's a special place where only the high priest went, and he only went there on the holiest day of the year, on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur. And inside of there was the Aron, the Ark. So where is the Ark? Wasn't that the whole premise of that movie from the 80s, that they were looking for the Ark? Isn't that what it means? The Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was lost. They were trying to find out where it was. Okay, don't. Like having Mandela effect, like maybe it never existed. I know it existed. I know there was such a thing. Okay. At any rate, so where is the Ark? I never thought about that. Ah, okay. Well, I'm asking you now. Where is the Ark? What? What? So people don't know that when Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, built the temple, he built catacombs. You know what catacombs are? Like caves, labyrinths, underneath the Bais Hamikdash. Why did he do it? Because he knew there would come a time when the temple he built would be destroyed. So precisely, the Aron, the Ark, is in its spot, just straight down. Now, you can't get there by going straight down because it's a convoluted, that's what a catacomb is by definition. It's convoluted. And I wouldn't recommend trying to go there. And even if you don't have issues of Tumah V'Tara, because you'll end up like that Nutty Putty cave guy if you try to do it. You got it, Simcha? You got it? You didn't laugh. It was a dark joke and you didn't laugh. What? You did? Okay. You held it in? Okay. So do not try. You know the reference? You Google it afterwards. You'll wish you didn't. Yeah. Yeah. Do not attempt to navigate the catacombs. You end up like the Nutty Putty cave guy. Funnier the second time. Okay. We're going to edit this out. Okay. It's very dark humor. Okay. This crowd didn't know one of the biggest Hollywood blockbusters of the 80s. Now I'm expecting they're going to know an obscure reference to a spelunking tragedy. Okay. At any rate, this is ultimately at the end, it's just for my amusement. So, yeah. Was it Sandman Sims? Was that what you're doing? Taking me off? Oh. I thought you were doing like a... No. Okay. All right. So the Aron is exactly in its spot, but it's in those catacombs that King Solomon built. What's the lesson to us? The lesson is, you look at the Bais Hamikdash, it's in a desolate state. It's destroyed. And yet the Aron is still there. I don't see it. It's there. Where is it? It's in there. It's down exactly in its spot. It's down there. You got to look for it. It's there. You got to know it's there. So you look at a Jew. Each one of us is a Bais Hamikdash. And he looks desolate. He looks completely removed from his Yiddishkeit. Who is this guy? And you have to know that within him is an Aron Kodesh, a holy ark, and it's there. It's there. It's covered up, but it's buried, but it's there. And specifically the Aron. The Aron, what was the contents? What were the contents of the Aron? Well, the luchos, the tablets, the 2 tablets that Moshe brought from Sinai, the embodiment of the law, the embodiment of the Torah. So the Aron with the luchos, the tablets, the ark with the tablets, that is our connection to Torah. So you see a Jew who looks like a desolate, destroyed Bais Hamikdash, but in that Jew, there is intact a connection to Torah. And we only need to access it, tap into it, and reveal it. It's there. That's why I never hesitate to share a word of Torah, even with someone you think has no interest in those types of things. You'll be shocked what types of subconscious responses you trigger inadvertently just by sharing a word of Torah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the Bais Hamikdash. The Bais Hamikdash was built on a mountain, a hilly mountain. I know it's called Har Habayis. Har means a mountain. It's not much of it. It's not like a mountain, more like a hill. But it's built on high ground. Could have been built the foot of the hill. It's built not on the tippy top of the hill. It's built actually, it's called the shoulder. Anatomically, if you imagine like an ox, is the way our sages describe it. So there's the head of the ox, and then there's the ox's shoulder. So that's like almost to the peak, but not quite. That's where the Bais Hamikdash was built, on Har Habayis. Har Habayis means the Temple Mount. Is it called the Temple Mount? This is not actually an attempt to be funny. You know, like who's buried in Grant's tomb? Right, that question. Is it called the Temple Mount because the temple was built on it, or was the temple built on it because it's the Temple Mount? So before it was the Bais Hamikdash, the Makam Hamikdash, it was Har Moriah. It was the site of the binding of Yitzchak. Yeah, and even before that, Yaakov Avinu visited. Yeah, well, that was after Avram and Yitzchak. But even before that, it was the place of the creation of Adam Rishon. It's the epicenter of the world. It's the eye of the universe. So the answer to the question is it Har Habayis because Hashem's chosen house is built there, or is Hashem's chosen house built there because it is what it is? And the answer is it is what it is. It's actually, the entire world was built from that spot. You mentioned the Even HaShasiyah, the foundation stone. So it's called Even HaShasiyah because Mimena Hushdas Ha'olam. From that stone, the entire world was created. So the Bais Hamikdash is on a hill. What's the point of that? So a lot of us tend to think about our Judaism. It's a religion after all. So it's a relationship with Hashem. So we think about it as something that's personal. And I'm not saying in the most brute expression of this, the most crass expression of this, where certain modernizing ideologues used to say, be a Jew in your house and a man in the street. I'm not even saying to that extent. I'm saying even there could be an observant Jew, and he's not hiding that he's Jewish, but at the same time, he's not going to flaunt his mitzvah observance. You know, it's like we don't have to rub it in their faces. We're in Gullus, you know, why do we have to make a show of it? Why do we have to be so public about it? There is such an attitude. But you look at the Bais Hamikdash, where's the Bais Hamikdash? It's on Har Habayis. It's on a Temple Mount. It's up, it's prominent. It's on high ground. And this is the message, that when you have something holy, it's good. Show the world. It's only something to be ashamed of if you yourself misunderstand what the purpose of the Bais Hamikdash is, and if you misunderstand what the purpose of your Jewish chosenness is. If you actually think that it's some license to use and abuse the world, then I guess you should be afraid of it. But when you realize, like I said earlier, that if the world knew what the Bais Hamikdash was doing for them, they would send their armies to protect the Bais Hamikdash. And we have to know that. We have to know that when Mashiach comes, it's good for the world. Most religions, if you're not a follower of their belief, then when their end of the world scenario unfolds, you're in trouble. And we don't say that. We say that when Mashiach comes, it's going to be good for everybody. The Bais Hamikdash will be rebuilt. It'll be good for everyone. It'll be peace and prosperity for everybody. The only people who are going to lose out are people who willingly fight it. But everyone will benefit, not just the Jewish people. Not just the Jewish people. Everyone will benefit from it. So once you understand that what the Bais Hamikdash symbolizes is this benevolence for the entire world, then why would you ever hide a good thing? Why would you put it under wraps? So be proud of your Judaism. Be open about it. Especially when you're out and about and you're in the secular world and you're dealing with business and you're dealing with non-Jews. So be open about your observance and be proud of it. Put it on display and show everybody that the more observant you are as a Jew, the better it is for the world. Because that's true. That's ultimately what it is. Let's talk about one of the areas in the Bais Hamikdash. There were different chambers. A chamber was called a lishka. And one of these chambers was called Lishkas ha'etz. Actually, it's confusing because there was a Lishkas ha'etzim and a Lishkas ha'etz. Lishkas ha'etzim was actually a storage shed for wood. You know why they needed wood in the temple? Fire. They had a lot of fire. You know what the fire was for? Yeah, the cooking, the carbonis. They had these sacrifices. They had to be burnt. So a lot of wood, yeah. You couldn't just, turn a knob and make a gas flame or propane or whatever. It had to burn wood. But then there was a Lishkas ha'etz. Lishkas ha'etz is, as opposed to Lishkas ha'etzim, Lishkas ha'etz was made from wood. And you're going to ask, well, how can it be made from wood? The Rambam also says you're not allowed to have protruding wood in the structure of the Bais Hamikdash. That's true. So it wasn't protruding. In fact, some say it was even covered. It was behind a veneer. Behind a facade, you couldn't see it. But at any rate, it was made from wood. And this structure was where the Kohen Gadol was kept, the high priest, for 7 days before Yom Kippur. That's where he would prepare for his big day, for opening night. And in the latter part of the Second Temple period, they began to refer to that chamber as the Lishkas Parhedrin. Parhedrin is a Greek word, which means the king's officers. And the commentaries explain that the reason why they referred to this chamber, remember the chamber was where the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would spend 7 days prepping for Yom Kippur. Why would they refer to that chamber as the Lishkas Parhedrin? And why didn't they ever call it that before? Why was that something they started using that expression in the latter part of the Second Temple period? Parhedrin means the king's officers. King's officers in that day were replaced yearly. There were annual appointments, 1-year appointments. In the latter part of the second Bais Hamikdash, there were unscrupulous people who were not fitting for the office of high priest. They bribed their way into the position, and when they would enter the Holy of Holies, they would die, either on the spot or within the year. Like Aaron's 2 sons, they entered the Holy of Holies and they were not fitting, and they died. So this is something that happened. They entered the Holy of Holies, and it's not. Well, you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know what happened to the guy. So. Okay, I'm hoping somebody on YouTube will see this and laugh, okay, because I'm not getting anything over here. Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you nightmare fuel. You're going to Google Nutty Putty Cave incident and the melting face. Nutty Putty Cave incident. And you remember Nutty Putty Cave?
No.
The melting face from Raiders? Okay. He's Googling it right now. Oh, you're going to nightmare fuel. It's nightmare fuel.
It was a Nazi.
What? It was a Nazi, though. So, yeah, okay. Baruch Hashem. Okay. All right. Remember where they found E.T. all gray in a ditch? Oh, man, I got to stop. Okay. Okay. All right. Remember that? I'm dying up here. Okay, what?
I saw it in the theater.
You saw it in the theater. What was it, 83? They had an Atari game. The ET Atari game made no sense. It was outrageous. Okay, Atari 2600. Okay, at any rate, what were we talking about? Don't tell me. Hold on. Don't do it. The Lishkas Parhedrin. Yes. These were unworthy people. They did not deserve to be high priests. They bribed their way in, and they would go into the Holy of Holies, and they didn't belong there, and they would die within the year. Okay. Interesting. Why would these guys do that? Why would they get themselves killed? So the Rebbe says from this you can learn something about the unbreakable bond between the Jewish soul and Hashem. Here you have a guy who's totally unfit for the office, has no business entering the Holy of Holies. And he's willing to bribe himself into this situation. You're telling us who this applies to? Don't say any names. We're recording over here. So he's willing to bribe his way into this position, knowing it's going to kill him, just so he can experience a little godly revelation. So there you go. Even somebody who you're writing him off, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, and deep down, we mentioned the Aron, the Holy Ark, is buried deep sometimes. But it's always there. It's always there. And it comes out in weird ways. And this is one of the examples where it came out. These corrupt high priests, at the end of the day, what do they want? They wanted a little godly revelation. Okay. Regarding the temple, one of the things we're told is they had guards. They had guards around the temple. It's actually a mitzvah to revere the Bais Hamikdash, and one of the ways that is carried out is by placing guards around the Bais Hamikdash. And the Rambam explains that the guards are not because they're afraid of invaders, and they're afraid people are going to break into the Bais Hamikdash, but rather for honor. That there's no comparison, the Rambam says, between a palace with guards and a palace without guards. You go to Buckingham Palace and you see the guard ceremony, the changing of the guard. And it's about honor. It's about showing that something is precious. You put a guard out front. It's not a practical thing. It's not like you're really expecting marauders are coming, you're going to have to fight them off. It's a form of respect. Okay, so what does that have to do with us? Each of us has a Bais Hamikdash. That means the parts of our lives and our days that we dedicate to Avodah, to service of Hashem. And we need to cherish that. We need to put a guard around it. Not because we're afraid of anti-Semitism. Somebody's going to come and tell us you're not allowed to learn Torah. You're not allowed to lead a Jewish life. We're guarding it not from hostility. We're guarding it to show respect for it. So for instance, if you have a time that's set up for learning, you have a class and you meet a certain time, certain day, you put guards around that. In other words, whatever you do to make sure you don't miss a flight out of JFK, you take the same precautions to make sure you're on time for that Torah class. Why? Because putting a guard around it, so to speak, shows that you cherish it, shows that it means something to you. Okay. And I'll share with you one last concept here. And that is, the Rambam tells us that it is forbidden to damage even one stone of the Bais Hamikdash. It's actually based on a verse which says that when the Jewish people were entering the land, they should destroy the Canaanite idolatrous altars, but do not do the same to the place of the Lord your God. Meaning we are to destroy the idolatrous altars, but do not destroy Hashem's house. And the Rambam says somebody who destroys even one stone of the Bais Hamikdash is transgressing this prohibition. Well, we have a principle. of Magid Devorav Yankiv Chukav Mishpatav L'Yisrael. Hashem gives his mitzvahs over to the Jewish people, meaning his mitzvahs, the mitzvahs that he keeps. How can Hashem tell us it's a mitzvah not to destroy the temple when he himself destroyed the temple? He tells us not to destroy even one stone. He destroyed the whole thing twice. So you have to look at it a little bit more deeply. The Rambam says, he uses a phrase, derech hashchasa, which translated would mean in a destructive manner or with destructive intent. What does that mean? He doesn't spell it out clearly, but you could actually learn this from something else that Rambam says, not in Hilchos Bais Hamikdash, but in the laws of a shul. You're not allowed to even knock down a shul, let alone the Bais Hamikdash. But you're not even allowed to knock down a shul. Except when are you allowed to knock down a shul? When you're doing renovation. Sometimes demolition is part of renovation. So derech hashchasa means to destroy, and the intent is to destroy. But if you're doing renovation and you do a little demo in order to make something better, so then it's not destructive at all. So what do we understand from this? The only reason Hashem was permitted, so to speak, to destroy his temple was for the purpose of rebuilding a greater one in its place. By the way, the second temple was bigger and stood longer than the first, and the third will be greater than all of them, and it'll be eternal. And this is also what we said at the very beginning about plowing, that this is all a growth process, and that when Mashiach comes, it's not just going to remove our pain, take away all of our suffering, but it's actually going to transform it. And we're going to see how everything Hashem did was just shifting things around to make it better than we could ever possibly dream. It was all productive. It was all purposeful. And during these 3 weeks, we should remember the pain of the destructive phase, the phase that feels destructive, but we should, that's the rear view mirror. We should also look at the windshield and remember that the real point of it all was never destruction to begin with. The real point of it all was always to bring us something greater. And we should be focused on that, because that's where we're heading. May it be immediately.